Hi everyone, Goin here at the Commander Bros. Today we're going to be covering CEDH Korvold in its full deck list. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it. Don't forget to subscribe, of course. So we're going to be covering Korvold, the Food King, as I call him. He is going to be our ultimate draw engine as a commander. Greatest thing about him is when you sacrifice a permanent, we're going to get a draw card off of that. His +1/+1 counters are kind of a cool novelty, but not super great in a CEDH format, as combat is going to be a very low chance to try and win the game. There are much better combinations that we can use to try and win out our games with Korvold and use his drawing effects to get to those stages in the game where we can do infinite mana things, infinite sacrifices things, that allow us to deal infinite damage to everybody on the board, kill off all creatures, kill off players, and put people in a place where they're not able to counter what we're doing. So we're going to go through, cover our win conditions here to start. First is going to be our primary win condition that we have in the deck. This is going to be all predicated on Food Chain. Food Chain allows us to exile a creature we control and then add the CMC of a creature +1 of any color. Eternal Scourge and Squee additionally allow us to have them be played from exile. So they're very powerful in that extent where we can exile them with Food Chain and then replay them over and over and over in an infinite manner to generate infinite mana for creature spells. So of course, since we can't use that mana on non-creature spells, the best way to win out with this is going to be Walking Ballista, where we can dump all that mana into creating an infinite Walking Ballista and then sacrifice all of those counters to kill everybody on the board. Our second win condition is going to be Dockside Extortionist and Teamer Sabertooth. The key to this combination is we have to have 5 or more artifacts or enchantments on the board that our opponents control in total. So not 5 per player or per opponent, 5 total. Because how this combination works is it costs 2 to play Dockside and it costs 2 to return them to our hand. So when we're going through playing that combination, we need the ability to net more mana than we're spending to replay Dockside over and over. If we do pull that off, we are going to now create infinite treasure tokens, which now opens up for us to have infinite sacrifices. We can play Korvold out with our infinite mana, and we can draw through the rest of our deck and play any combination we want to win the game. So we can go back to the first win condition I showed with Food Chain, Eternal Scourge, Walking Ballista, and Squee. Not that we would need the mana anymore, but we could go back and use that Walking Ballista or other creatures that we have in the deck that allow us to ping out damage and win. Our third win condition is going to be Reassembly Skeleton with Phyrexian Altar and Pitiless Plunderer. So we just have to be able to sacrifice Reassembly Skeleton to Phyrexian Altar while Pitiless Plunderer is down. That is going to generate 1 treasure token from Pitiless Plunderer and 1 mana of any color from Phyrexian Altar, allowing us to replay Reassembly Skeleton from our graveyard for 2. This creates infinite sacrifices, but does not create infinite mana, so we need another additional setup to try and win the game here. And those cards are going to be Blood Artist, Zolaport, and Mayhem. If we have them on the field already, we win the game right then and there. Or we need to have Korvold on the field to get this combination to work. If Korvold's out with infinite sacrifices, we can now infinitely draw to get these creatures out and the mana needed for them in the form of our free rocks. Or free mana rocks, that is. Alright, so that's going to cover our combinations. Other things we do have in the deck is additional sacrifice engines. So we do want to have the ability to sacrifice our creatures in a multitude of ways for pacing the deck out. Goblin Bombardment and Visceracy are 2 of the cheapest that do that and also provide value when we sacrifice those creatures in the form of scry or dealing damage. One of the best examples of this is we can use this with Reassembly Skeleton with the limited mana that we do have while Korvold is out so that we can go in and draw cards off of it. If we have Pitiless Plunderer out, that's even better. We can draw double the amount of cards for each time that we sacrifice and replay Reassembly Skeleton. Of course, without Phyrexian Altar, we're not getting the unlimited mana, but being able to draw anywhere from 2 to 16 cards in a turn is going to be very powerful to generate a win condition in the game. And getting into land base here, biggest thing I wanted to cover in this is your land base is going to be very, very important, and you need to have all of your lands coming untapped. If that's not happening and your lands are coming in tapped, you will get beat very often in a CEDH format. And so I have this broken out very specifically so that we're able to not have mana issues as we're playing our different lands in the deck. Biggest thing is having 5 all-color lands. And the ones we are going to use is City of Brass and Mana Confluence for the first 2. We're going to take 1 damage when these guys are tapped as a negative effect, which isn't a huge deal as our CEDH turns usually only last, or games will usually only last anywhere from 3 to 7 turns, so taking a little bit of damage doesn't really hurt us all that bad. Command Tower, of course, staple in Commander, no negative effects to get any mana that you want. Forbidden Orchard, this is getting given opponent a 1/1 Spirit token each time that we tap it. If we're giving this to a non-sacrifice Graveyard Recursion deck, this is a great card to give a Spirit token away, and it's just a useless token that hangs out. Exotic Orchard, this one's a little bit dicey as it only produces mana your opponent's lands could produce, but I do find more often than not I'll at least get 2 of the 3 colors in our deck from opponents, as blue pairs up very nicely with our color scheme, and a lot of decks will run black, red, or green in addition to their blue mana base. And I see that pretty commonly across the CEDH landscape. So it normally ends up being a dual land that you can use, just not of your choosing, which is okay. It's a very cheap land that allows you to have the chance to have all 3 colors. The last is going to be our 2 utility lands. We're going to go in and get colorless for these lands for their first effect. Their second effects are very powerful, and where High Market allows us to sacrifice a creature and gain a life. If we have Korvold out, then we're drawing a card. With Treasure Vault, we can take any number of mana to create treasure tokens, which allows us to draw cards and get extra mana out. Or we can do it in an infinite sense and create infinite treasure tokens with it. So once we've secured infinite mana, if you wanted to do another different infinite mana combo than the one shown here, one of the other good examples is there's a Sword from New Cardina and Devoted Druid that creates infinite green mana. You could convert that green mana into infinite treasure tokens with Treasure Vault as well, which is a combo that I'm looking at adding to the deck in addition. So that would be a great way to utilize Treasure Vault, as where Dockside and Teamer already create you that treasure tokens. So yeah, there's a couple of different ways to use Treasure Vault. Mostly I just use it as a way to get cards out and get some sacrifices for Korvold going, and then I end up sacrificing Treasure Vault. A little bit of short-term loss for some long-term game. And then getting into Fabled Passage, this is going to be a sacrifice land that allows us to get a draw if Korvold's out. And then if it's our 4th land that enters, it comes in untapped. So this is very helpful in the ability to be able to have an untapped land that you're choosing to come in, get a draw off of it, and then have your mana set up right for the start of your 4th turn, or in some cases the start of your 3rd turn, depending on how our ramp is going with some of our ramp spells. All right, and then getting into the left side of this page here, we do have 10 basic lands and 3 swamp, 3 mountain, and 4 forests. Again, we're going to use a few different green ramp spells to belt those guys out. And then we do want 15 dual lands and 5 of each combination. So 5 red and black, 5 red and green, 5 black and green. 3 of those need to be sacrificed to searches of the 15. The 3 that I highly recommend is going to be Bloodstained Mire, Verdant Catacombs, and Wooded Foothills. They match the color combinations for the decks and allow you to draw when you sacrifice them and get in shock lands that come in untapped, which is a very powerful thing to have an untapped dual land into play and a free sacrifice trigger off of Korvold, and allows you to get card draw and ramp up very quickly. All these lands need to come in untapped for speed. I mean, again, I can't reiterate how important that is to the deck. Again, if you have tapped lands coming in, you are going to lose very often in this type of deck that doesn't have blue interaction. All right, let's start covering mana ramp here. The first form is going to be gaining untapped lands. Nature's Lore in 3 visits gives us an untapped forest, not just a basic land. So if we have dual lands that are forests, we can get those into play untapped. Of course, my favorite forms are the shock lands that came out, I believe, in Ravnica, and those are going to be the best ones to use for these 2 cards. Harrow allows us to sack a land, of course, get a draw trigger if we have Korvold out, and then we get 2 basics into play untapped to use for another spell or interaction. And then the last is going to be Farseek. This is going to be the only one that allows us to put a land to play tapped, but it does allow us to get a swamp or a mountain, which again allows you to pull from one of your dual lands instead of just getting a basic. And Farseek is definitely the worst of the 4 up here, but it does have value in setting up our next turn, where we're already putting in untapped lands and then just setting up a turn where we have additional mana starting our following turn. All right, now going through our next form of mana ramp. This is going to be creatures that we use to create mana ramp, and it's things that we produce mana with in a short-term or long-term sense, but also things we can sacrifice to Korvold as well to get him out and into play. First one is Bloom Tender, least likely one that we're going to want to sacrifice, as we get other permanents that are black black and red into play, Bloom Tender will tap for each of those colors when you tap it, so you can get up to 2 or 3 mana in the color scheme that we're running out and belt that mana very quickly with Bloom Tender. Skirk Prospector is, of course, the sack engine for goblins, and we run about 5 or 6 different goblins in the deck, and we can go through and sacrifice those goblins to get red mana value off of them. I've used Dockside Extortionist very often to go through and sacrifice him to replay him when I don't have Temur Sabertooth to get a mana curve ahead of people. Also, Impulsive Pilferer does a great job of being able to be sacrificed, get a treasure token off of him. Then you can take that treasure token, turn it into a black mana for something like a Reanimate or an Unearth, bring him back, sack him again, and you've just netted 3 mana off the transaction, where now you have a treasure token and 2 red mana to go play whatever you would like. And then the last 2 are going to be Birds of Paradise and Gilded Goose. With Birds of Paradise, it's a great 1-drop that gives us 1 mana of any color so that we don't get mana stuck with our spells. So it's just a great pacing card. And then, of course, we can always sacrifice it later to Korvold once we've used up its usefulness and don't really feel we need that extra mana. With Gilded Goose, he's a very interesting card for Korvold because it's a 1-mana card that's going to generate a 0/2 creature and also a food token when he enters. We can, of course, use that food token to get 1 mana of any color. And if Korvold's out, we've gone through and sacrificed that token, gotten a draw off it, and gotten a mana. The other way that I use him is to get Korvold out. So I'll go through and sacrifice the food token to get Korvold out, draw a card. And then I'll sacrifice Gilded Goose to one of our different sack outlets to draw an additional card. So a great low-cost food for Korvold. And then the next is going to be consistent mana rocks for our ramping. We want things that generate mana every turn for us, that's consistent, that can help us stay on curve and stay ahead of players. First will be Carpet of Flowers. During our main phase, we can add up to X mana of 1 color to our mana pool, where X is the number of islands target opponent controls. The important thing about this is we're going to play a lot of blue CEDH decks, so if they even get 2 basic islands down, or two islands, even if they're dual lands into play, we get to generate free mana every turn off of that. And it gives us the chance to use that mana to play our spells during our turn and keep our other rocks and land open for interaction against that blue deck. And I find that to be very powerful to keep a blue deck under control and not wrecking our board every turn. The next, of course, is going to be Soul Ring, staple in every commander deck. 1 colorless gives us 2 colorless, just gets us ahead on mana curve. Mana Crypt does the same thing, but it's even better as it costs us 0. Only downside is it hurts us if we lose the coin flip every turn. But the great thing about Mana Crypt is we can combo some really ridiculous turn 1s with some of our other ways to ramp, where we can throw out a Harrow, for example, get Harrow down, which is a 3-cost spell. As long as we played a green land that turn, we can tap that green land, play Mana Crypt, play a Harrow down, sacrifice our tapped land, get 2 untapped into play, and now we can play a 2-cost spell, have a tapped Mana Crypt in, or save that 2 mana for interaction to blow up things on the board we don't like on the starting of the game. And I've used that combination quite frequently, and it's very powerful with Mana Crypt and a must-have in the deck. Arcane Signet, of course, pairs up just nicely with Soul Ring, where we can quickly pump out mana and get ahead of a mana curve, or Mana Crypt even. I mean, either of these 2 can go straight into an Arcane Signet and give you another colored mana to have on standby for interaction, or playing one of our small creatures that allows us to generate mana. Next type of ramp that we're going to use is going to be what I call quick bursts. So these are things that we're going to be used just once, but it ramps us up and gives us just some additional mana we may need for a turn. Mana Vault costs 1, but gives us 3 colorless when we tap it. Downside to Mana Vault is we're never going to have the ability to untap it and pay the 4 to do that, and it never untaps. But we can use it as a food to Korvold to draw cards. So when we cast Korvold, just sack the Mana Vault after we've used its usefulness, and boom, right there, we've alleviated the issue with Korvold of needing food right away and gotten some mana off of it. Next is Jeweled Lotus, of course, a must-have in a commander deck that costs 5 CMC to get Korvold out. Just minimizes and makes his CMC, cuts it down to 2 so that we don't need an insane amount of mana and we're not blowing all of our mana for a turn just to get Korvold out. Next is going to be Lotus Petal. This one is a great way to get an additional mana for the turn, but it also is a sacrifice trigger for Korvold as well. So it's a quick way to bump us up a mana, get a quick card draw, and then assess what we want to do from there. And then lastly, good old Dark Ritual. So with Dark Ritual, this one's going to primarily be used with some of our heavier black spells that require 2 or 3 hard black mana, so that we're going to have to blow all of our black mana to get some of those spells down and leave us in a hurting position to use our other black spells. So what examples in the deck that we use is going to be the new Braids from Dominaria United. We're going to use Bola Citadel, which costs 6 mana, cuts it down to 3 colorless after we use a Dark Ritual on it. And then the last one will be Grave Pact, where we're making people sacrifice creatures. So Dark Ritual pairs nicely with those cards. All right, let's get into tutors here. Tutors are going to be very important to the deck. In this deck, we're going to run 10 different tutors, 5 green and 5 black tutors for the card draw of the deck. Korvold does a great job of drawing us cards, but he doesn't do a great job of getting us specific things that we need at specific times. That's where tutors are going to come in here. Starting off with Summoner's Pact, this one's kind of a no-brainer to try and push a win condition. Pay 0 for it. Get a creature immediately into your hand that can help you win the game. Worldly Tutor can be played at instant speed. We can search for a creature card, reveal that card, and then put it on top of our library. This is a good way to set up for our next turn, so we can keep mana open for interaction, and then before our next turn starts, at the last opponent's end step, we can go in and search out a creature card we want to draw for the following turn. Finale of Devastation is very powerful, as it not only searches from a library but from our graveyard, and that's why it's such an expensive tutor. And then, of course, we are not going to use its second effect of 10 or more. We're not really a combat deck, so we don't really need to give our creatures +X in haste. It's kind of a novelty thing to have that as an effect for this deck anyways. And most green decks, it's a very highly used mechanic for them. Green Sun Zenith is great as we can play colorless, so mana of any color plus just 1 green to get any creature we want from our library straight into play. That's going to be very powerful to set up win conditions or shut down different things that players are doing to us. Our creatures have a lot of high interaction to shut things down, and I really like Green Sun Zenith to draw an immediate answer with our creatures to shut something down or set up for one of our win conditions. Threats Undetected, of course, one of the new cards of Dominaria United. I think this is a very underrated card. The downside to it is we have to show the 4 creatures we want to our opponents, and an opponent's going to choose 2 of those cards. The nice thing about this card is for 3 mana, you're going to get 2 creature cards into your hand, and you can play a shell game of no matter what they pick and they don't know what's in your hand, is it's going to give you a benefit to try and win or deal with stuff on the board. So an example of what I would use with Threats Undetected is I would go in and get Squeeze the Immortal, Eternal Scourge, Temur Sabertooth, and Dockside Extortionist. Well, if I already have Food Chain in my hand, and they give me Temur Sabertooth and Dockside Extortionist, I can go ahead and win the game. In any example where they give me Temur Sabertooth and Squee or Eternal Scourge, I can go ahead and play Food Chain, Eternal Scourge, or Squee and win the game. So it's a very powerful way to push people into doing things. That doesn't matter what they pick, you're still going to win anyways. Our next tutor is going to be black card tutors. So this is going to get into Korvold getting in and giving us cards we need again through draw, but not giving us specific things at specific times. The great thing about black tutors is we don't have to reveal them. We can pick any card we want, not just creatures. And we're going to use the cheapest mana cost forms of those possible. So Vamp Tutor 1, it's a better version of Worldly Tutors. We get any card, it's at instant speed like Worldly Tutor, and we put it on top of our library. Imperial Seal is a little worse version of Vamp Tutor as it's a sorcery, so we don't get to play it at that instant speed, but still puts any card we want on top of our library. Next is the best tutor in the game, to my belief, is Demonic Tutor. We can go in and search for any card that we want, put it straight into our hand for only 2 mana. Next being Wishclaw Talisman. Wishclaw Talisman is usually not used a lot in CEDH because you have to give it to another player. We're going to utilize it in a way where the only time we're going to use Wishclaw Talisman is when we're casting Korvold, so that we can sacrifice Wishclaw Talisman to Korvold for his trigger upon entering, and then go through, get a card that we want, and nobody gets the Wishclaw Talisman. So for 3 mana, we're getting anything we want, and we get a free sacrifice draw to Korvold. The last is going to be Crack the Vault or Grim Tutor. Again, it's a 3-cost version of Demonic Tutor that costs us a little bit of life, but still gives us any card we want that we can plop straight into our hand. So very powerful in those instances. We can go in and tutor things we need at specific times to shut decks down or push a win condition. Next is going to be draw cards. Draw cards is going to look a lot different in Korvold, as Korvold draws cards on his own, so we don't need a plethora of them. Most of your commander decks run 10 to 12 draw cards, where here we're only going to run 4, and we're going to pick the best 4 that we think could help us win. So Village Rites, of course, is a great pacing card. Without Korvold, we're getting 2 cards, and we sacrifice a creature we don't really need. Or we're going to sacrifice, or if we do have Korvold out, we're going to get 3 cards off of 1 mana and a creature we don't need. And I find that to be very powerful, as we can go in and get a whole lot of value in 3 cards and get set up to go and try and win the game or have extra interaction in our hand. The next is going to be Sylvan Library, of course, just a staple across CEDH for green. It gives us essentially the ability to look at the top 2 cards of our library all the time, and then also be able to draw additional cards, or draw those 2 additional cards if we pay the life for them. So Sylvan Library, in a lot of cases when I've played this deck, has been the difference between winning and losing, where I get 2 free cards straight into my hand, pay a little bit of life for them, and it's my winning combinations to shut down counterspells and play out a combination to win, or have just the right interaction to shut down something that would cost me the game on the turn coming through. The third is going to be Braids. So this is a new card from Dominaria United as well. At the beginning of your end step, we can go through and pick a type of card we want to sacrifice. Again, draws us a card if Korvold's out. If we do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. So if we pick that food token from Gilded Goose, and everyone now has to choose whether they want to sacrifice an artifact that they own, or they get to lose 2 life and give us a card per player out there. So if you're playing in a 4-person pod, you have the potential to draw 3 cards at every end step, plus an additional one from the thing that you sacrificed, and get 4 free cards every single turn. Or you're taking things off the board from people. I find that to be ridiculous value for 3 mana. We can Dark Ritual out that sucker on turn 1 and do whatever we want from there. Right, and then the last draw card is going to be Bolas Citadel. This has the ability for us to look at our top card at any time, so that's helpful in having information. We can also cast any type of lands or spells by paying their CMC in life. And then also we can go in and tap Bolas Citadel and sack 10 non-land permanents, and each opponent's going to lose 10 life for that. So if we create infinite treasure tokens, Bolas Citadel is a backup to Walking Ballista, where we can wipe everybody off the board. Right, interaction. So this is what I would like to call opponents aren't allowed to have creatures. We do not want our opponents being allowed to have the creatures that help them win the game. So I picked the 3 best ones that I could find in Magic that allows me to take creatures away from players when I choose it. The first one being Sudden Edict, which has the most versatility, where I can pick for me to sacrifice a creature that I want to sacrifice, and I don't have another way to do it currently. Or I can force a player into sacrificing creatures they don't want to sacrifice. And the other great thing about it is it has split second. When I play this spell, it's non-counterable, they can't counter it, and they can't use any type of interaction or abilities with their creatures to stop that sacrifice from going through, or to get extra value before the sacrifice goes through. Split second shuts everything down for the stack. The second is going to be Soul Shatter. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest CMC cost among creatures and planeswalkers they control. Most commonly, the first time someone plays their commander in a CEDH game, the highest CMC creature they own is their commander. And I'll have plenty of games where one person will play their commander, and then a second or third person is going to start playing their commander to stay on pace with them. And now I can go through before the start of my next turn, use 3 open mana I have, and take them all away from them and make them sacrifice their commanders, and they just lost a whole entire turn off of it. The next is going to be Grave Pact. Grave Pact is the most expensive card among the ones here, but also one of the most powerful ones that we have. It's going to shut down the ability for anyone to have creatures, and more often than not, someone is going to try and take this enchantment away from you. So it's a great way to where you can threaten a board and go through and do what you want to do to them. And if they allow it, they're going to lose all their creatures and never be allowed to play creatures. Or they have to burn up interaction to get rid of it, which gives us ability to play our combos. The next one is going to be interaction for what I call like biting into a porcupine. These are things we're going to do to people for trying to mess with our stuff. So Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast essentially do the same thing. We like running these cards because it's going to be heavy blue interaction. So if someone tries to counter our stuff, we can shut that counter spell down. We can take away their blue commander from them and counter or destroy it and use it in a very versatile way that way. Or we can take away blue enchantments we don't like to deal with. So common ones that I absolutely despise playing against as a black-green red deck is I don't like giving free card draw and Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study. I don't have to overreact to those spells and burn up other types of removal in my deck. I can use a 1-cost red spell and take that Rhystic Study or Mystic Remora away if I need to. And then the last card is going to be Sudden Spoiling in this set. Of course, that one has split second as well, so players are not allowed to go through and try and counter this. They can't use creature abilities as soon as you cast it. And then all of their creatures become 0/2 and useless, and they lose all their abilities. So if they have an activated ability, well, now that ability can't be used. Split second shuts down the stack. And then, of course, my favorite card out of this interaction set is going to be Deflecting Swat. If someone targets us, we can redirect that spell straight back at another player or the user that tried to disrupt us. And of course, with Korvold being out, and that's going to be one people commonly are going to focus on if they want to keep taking Korvold away from us. It's a great protection spell for Korvold, and we get value in playing it for free and harm someone else for trying to mess with us. All right. My favorite type of interaction is destruction. So I want to take pieces away from people as much as possible. The best card that I found to do that is Assassin's Trophy, where I can blow up any permanent on the board and give them a basic land when I blow it up. So in that sense, for 2 mana and giving them a basic land, I can take away win conditions. I can take away things that are ailing my deck. And it's a very effective, cheap CMC card that allows me to do so. And then also cut down just gives us the ability to take away low power and toughness commanders for 1 mana, or creatures that we just don't want to deal with that are essentially going to be what I call stack pieces that just shut down parts of our deck. So any type of creature that doesn't allow us to play from our graveyard, they're usually pretty low power and toughness creatures that I can deal with without having to invest a lot of mana into. And our last form of interaction is going to be artifact and enchantment removal. So this is going to be very important to us of being able to keep people under control with the amount of mana that they have access to and the different artifacts and enchantments that are out there that amplify their deck very harshly. And I want to take those things away and use them against them with Treasure Nabber, where I can take that mana rock from them and use it. Also, I would like to be able to just straight up blow them up and do it over and over with Outland Liberator and Reclamation Sage. With our Graveyard Recursion cards, we can keep bringing these guys back out and destroying threats on the board as they pop up. And then the most efficient one of these 4 is going to be Force of Vigor. This allows us to not pay its mana cost, just exile a green card from our hand and get rid of 2 things and artifacts or enchantments that are on the board that are ailing us or allowing a player to get ahead and amp up against us. And my favorite type of interaction is what I call anti-blue interaction. So this is going to be cards that allow us to protect our board. And when we're going for win conditions or board building, it allows us to shut down counter spells immediately. It allows us to give our stuff hexproof. And it puts us in a position where we can play our stuff without having to play the shell game of if someone has counter spells in their hand. So Veil of Summer does that at instant speed, same as Autumn's Veil. The difference between the two is Veil of Summer allows us to draw, Autumn's Veil does not, but they both give us hexproof, and our spells can't be countered from blue and black sources. Vexing Suture is the most overpowered one of the 4 here, as we can pay 1 mana and make a target spell non-counterable. What makes that so great is not only stuff that interacts against us can be not countered. So if someone tries to counter, let's say, our food chain, we can just shut it down for 1 mana and say, nope, you can't counter this. But we can also interact with other happenings on the board. So if we want something to happen on the board and someone goes to counterspell it, we can make that spell not be countered. And it's a very effective way to control the board as well, to make things happen or not happen based on what we want the board state to be, depending on what we're fighting against. Allosaurus Shepherd. Of course, this guy is wonderful for 1 green mana. Our green spells can't be countered, which is a big deal for getting food chain out, of course. And then any other green spell we play from then on out can't be countered. And it puts us in a state of shutting down counter spells against some of our very powerful cards. last thing I wanted to cover here was Graveyard Recursion. So this is going to include Noxus Revival, Reanimate, Eternal Witness, and Unearth. Reanimate and Unearth virtually do the same thing. Reanimate just allows you to get any CMC card. Unearth limits you to 3. Well, in our deck, there's only one card that's more than 3 CMC, and that's Temur Sabertooth. And then, of course, our commander Korvold, which isn't in the 99. And then we have Eternal Witness, which allows us to return any card from our graveyard to our hand. Then we can go through and sack him out for card draw, and then replay him again if we wanted with Unearth or Reanimate to return something else. Noxus Revival, we can pay with life instead of mana, so shotgun 2 life to go through and get any card we want and put on top of our library. So again, I find that insanely useful for in times where we've had something taken away from us, we can get it replayed, or if we've sacrificed something, we can go ahead and get it replayed again. And that concludes our Korvold guide. Hope you guys enjoyed it. This has been a deck I've really enjoyed getting to make. And of course, the Mox field will be posted in the link below. Links on our Discord will be in for you to hop in and join our community. And then, yeah, don't forget to subscribe, get live updates from us when we're playing games together as a group. Love to have you guys come watch and hang out and have a great time with us. Other than that, appreciate all your time. Have a great day, everyone.